Alors, mesdames et messieurs, puis-je avoir votre attention, s'il vous plaît, mesdames et messieurs? Je suis désolé d'interrompre vos conversations. Nous allons maintenant reprendre. Merci beaucoup. Alors, comme je le disais, nous allons... Ça va? On revient lentement. Et voilà. Bravo, bravo. Alors, je le disais, nous allons maintenant reprendre. I now invite His Excellency Sanjay Kumar Verma and Mr. Rahul Ravi to come to the stage, please.
Bonjour. Je tiens le quorum pour l'invitation et pour rassembler une belle audience aujourd'hui. And of course, I'm going to spare you my French, so we'll switch over to English for the rest of the conversation. Welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you here today. And Excellency Verma, it's our pleasure to have you here. Thank you for taking out the time and being here. We are looking forward to sharing and hearing your thoughts on the ever important growing the trade relations between India and Canada, and of course a lot of the current affairs. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ravi. Thanks to Corim for having invited me here, and thank you all for joining today. People would be interested in first understanding what's happening now, and then we can talk about what lies in the future in the bilateral relations between our two countries. Like any other large relationship, there are positives, there are some negatives as well. Let me start with negative, because positives are much more as compared to negatives, so I'll come to the positives later. Negative part is what is being played out today, and all of you are well aware of the stories which are covered by media, which is a bit colored, but nevertheless, there would be some facts in that. The larger question from the perspective of a foreign affairs enthusiast would be the origin of what's happening today and what you read so much politically. The origin is the lack of understanding of India's concerns. When we call two countries in bilateral relations as partners, strategic partners, friends, we expect both the countries to understand each other's perspectives, each other's concerns, respect the cultural diversity of each other. Unfortunately, there had been issues, and this is nothing new, decades-old issues, which have resurfaced, re-emerged, and there had been unfortunate crimes wherein those who are currently Canadian citizens, largely having their origin in India. India does not have dual nationality. So therefore, if someone becomes a Canadian citizen or citizen of any other country, he or she is no longer an Indian citizen. So for us, technically, the person is a foreigner. So the foreigners having, if I can call it, evil eye on the territorial integrity of India, that is a big red line for us. Indians will decide what will happen to India. Indians will decide the fate of India, not the foreigners. If those people who are Indians living abroad want to decide the fate of India, better to go back and participate in the election process. Every 5 years, India goes through an election process at the national level, almost every 5 years. And similarly, the states, which are provinces, as we call here, in India also go through similar exercises. All the issues which are of interest to Indians are being put to vote. So therefore, that is the reason, that is the origin why you are seeing some of the coverage that you see today. But let me assure you that there is a lot of noise beyond what is being done. A lot of discussions at the government level, both sides, is happening. And through the diplomatic channels, these channels are not open to public. And these diplomatic channels are trying to find solutions and resolutions to the issues of concern on both sides. And the way in which it is moving, I think it will come to both sides to see the virtue of resolving the issues, satisfying the concerns of both sides. As far as I'm concerned, my concern is national security, threats emanating from the land of Canada. These threats are largely emanating from the Canadian citizens. So these two are my red lines. We are ready to sit down on the table any day, and we are doing that, and we are trying to resolve this issue. So that was the negative side, which I wanted to tell you. So very small, out of 30 minutes, I think 3 minutes on negative. There are so many positive things which are happening.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Excellency Verma. We often talk about how it's only when the man bites the dog that it becomes a news. The dog biting a man is not a news. So a lot of things, as you mentioned, in fact, it is happening, but it's rarely in the media. When we see the noise that we see in the media, it almost overshadows everything. So thank you for sharing those points. And that actually brings us to a lot of other things which are probably not as sensational and yet probably more important. So I'd like to hear your views on Canada and India has always had a very strong trade relation, ever evolving, ever growing. How do you see that? Can you share some thoughts on it?
The bilateral trade is doing very well, and I'll give you some data. I'll share some data with you for you to understand. Largely, if I can see the cluster, we source a lot of natural resources, agricultural resources from Canada. We supply a lot of processed goods and manufactured goods to Canada. So that is the larger cluster. And don't get me wrong, there will be a few items which will go beyond this envelope and define the relationship. The bilateral trade has been consistently increasing, including during the period, and I'll give you data again to support it, including in the period when we saw divergence of views between the two sides on the political issues. So business relationship is very secular of all these political trends, and they are doing fine. So let me just share some insights so that you can understand what I was saying. And by the way, from Quebec, there are about 110 Quebecan companies in India doing business. Thank you very much for that. The imports, let me just read out top 5-7 items so that you can get a general feeler. So our largest import, and what I'm doing is, it is in US dollar terms, because that is how the foreign trade is counted. I have not converted to Canadian dollar because the fluctuation of rates will not allow me to convert it in that manner and be truthful to it. Indian financial year starts on the 1st of April, goes up to 31st of March next year. So this is according to the Indian financial year, but since the data available to me is only up to February, so I will be giving you the data between April 1st of last year till February end this year. March data, whenever it becomes available, then there will be an additional addition. So we can generally extrapolate 1/12 and move ahead. So my largest import from Canada was coking coal, which is also known as metallurgical coal. It goes into the steel industry largely, but also in some other processing industries. In between April and February 2020, April 23 and February 2024, it was $850 million US. It declined by 17.5%. Reason is that we are adding renewable sources of energy into energy production. From the metallurgical point of view as well, we have new kinds of formulations being added into creation of stainless steel, and therefore it has gone down. Plus, we also had a big inventory lying in India, as well as some new sources of import, which were identified and commercially more viable than getting the coal from Canada. But still, the coking coal is close to about $850 million US, which is more than $1 billion Canadian dollar at whatever rate we exchange. Second largest import into India was lentils. And I'm doing all these analysis at the 8-digit depth of HS codes, so that, as much granularity I can define. So lentils, last year, or up to February, sorry, we imported about $604 million US worth, which is 75% increase over the same period last year. And if my memory serves me well, there was a press release from the government of Saskatchewan, from where we import the largest amount of lentils, that in the first quarter, according to their statistics, it has increased by 600%. I don't have that data, but that was in the press release there. Then we import a lot of non-industrial diamond from Canada. For what? We process it in India, prepare it according to the requirements of the market, send it back to Canada for setting into jewelry. So that is the basic purpose. And the period I'm talking about, we saw almost 28,000% increase, which means it was not there earlier. It is a new item which was added last year. And that was close to about $270 million US. Similarly, newsprints, copper, concentrates, etc. So you will see that largely we are talking about the agricultural products going to India. Largely we are talking about the mineral resources from Canada going to India. Now let me just read out a few items of exports from India for you to understand what I was talking about. So my largest export to Canada happens to be medicines. And that was, I think I kept this somewhere. Yeah. So my largest export to Canada is medicines, not bulk, but prepared medicines. And that has seen 21.1% growth over the same period. My second largest export to Canada happens to be shrimp, which grew by 10% last year. My third largest export to Canada happens to be smartphones. And the smartphones exported last year to Canada was close to about $105 million US, which would be, I would say, about 1 million pieces of smartphones coming to Canada from India. Basmati rice, which is largely due to people like me staying here and consuming the basmati rice, that also saw close to 14% increase. So then coaches, your train coaches. So what I wanted to clarify to you is that this is a relationship which is self-serving. We get raw materials, there's no competition there. We get raw materials and agricultural products from you. We supply to you processed and manufactured goods. Many of them of the same input, but some others of different inputs as well. The trade volume between the two sides have consistently been on an increase. And today we are talking about close to, now let me switch to Canadian dollar, close to about 12.7 billion Canadian dollars of trade in goods last year. Trade in services. India is very strong in services, as all of us know. Canada is probably one of the very few countries which exports more services to India than it imports from India. In the US, we export much higher volumes of services to US than we import from the US. So the trade in services with Canada is close to about $13 billion. So if I take both the trades together, you're talking about a volume of 25 billion Canadian dollars of bilateral trade, or even more, 26 billion actually. So that gives you an idea as to where we are on the bilateral trade. It's doing well. There is not much restriction on trade on both sides. From time to time, there will be issues which will crop up on trade disputes, which both the diplomatic establishments are capable of resolving.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, that's a beautiful picture where the two sides complement each other. Do you see any barriers? I mean, what do you see as the barriers, in fact, to this relationship?
I don't see much barrier. You know, every country has to protect its domestic industry as well, and therefore there would be some anti-dumping cases on. So the Indian steel faces an anti-dumping duty in Canada, but those are fine. Those are fine because they are backed by the scientific data, and they follow the norms which are provided by the WTO dispute settlement mechanism. So DSB is followed there. So I don't see that as a barrier. I see that as a process which has been agreed by both India and Canada, being the members of the WTO and original members of the GATT as well. So that is fine. I don't see much of the problem there. There are, again, restrictions due to the human consumptions of some of the items, like I talked about shrimp, which is fine. When lentils go from here, we insisted about fumigation, which we wanted every lentil to land in India with fumigation. We studied the Canadian system and we waived off the fumigation process on year-by-year basis. So that's fine, and this is doing well. I have no concern at all there.
Thank you. And now, one thing, of course, I mean, this is an amazing time to be having this conversation, given that India is going through the general elections, and the largest and the scale of the exercise is something which probably only an Indian is fully able to appreciate. But just the sheer size. But then one thing which elections do is bring certain uncertainties. Now, can you share some thoughts on what are your thoughts on?
So those who are uninitiated on Indian elections, let me start with there. So we are 1.4 billion of people like me, sitting in a very small geography. Out of 1.4 billion, this year, for national elections, the eligible number of voters were 960 million. Roughly, I would say, rule of thumb, 65% would actually turn up and vote. Rule of thumb. So even if you take 65% of 960 million, you're talking about roughly 600 million plus. So people who actually walk into an election polling booth and cast the vote would be 600 million plus. The whole election process has to be managed by a handful of officials. And of course, we have to secure the booth for the security purposes, so security officials. We have only those many of them, so they will have to shift from one geography to another. So we divide the entire election process this time in 7 phases, which means that roughly you are talking about close to 140 million eligible voters for each phase of election. The entire election is fully electronic, not a single paper to be cast. And not only this election, last decades we have done through that. 1st of June, the entire election process will be over, and we hope to get results by 3rd of June or 4th of June, depending on which time zone we are in. And that is with a push of a button. So the actual election takes 1.5 months approximately. But the actual result and counting of vote takes a couple of hours. So that is what Indian election is. On the unpredictability, which is common for all democracies. We are Earth's largest democracy. So yes, there would be concerns on the part of those who are involved in the Indian regulatory system or who has to deal with the Indian regulatory system. But one thing I can assure all of you, that we have reached a critical mass of our economy wherein you can define the predictability of the business environment in India. There could be social changes, but as far as the regulatory framework for business, both trade and investment are concerned, the regulatory framework of innovation is concerned, the regulatory framework of infrastructure creation is concerned, I personally do not think that it will be changing for the worse. It is now only going to move up and up. We are today creating 32 kilometers of highways, expressway, as you call, on a single day. So when you look at the capacity, when you look at the numbers, it's quite significant. The momentum has picked up so well that it doesn't matter who is there, would not be able to go retrograde, and therefore the policies will have to only move forward. So tomorrow you will see more reforms happening in the Indian economy.
Thank you. I'm sure that's quite reassuring. And in fact, yeah, I don't want to put words in your But coming back to the sectors, in fact, one thing which I would really love to hear your thoughts on. In fact, for Canada, SMEs constitute the biggest chunk. If you look at the Canadian economy, SMEs are over 90%. When we think of India, again, SMEs play a very important role. Is there, what's either your office or through, are there mechanisms in place to support SMEs, the collaboration across the two countries? I mean, can you talk a bit about
Absolutely. So when I look at the SMEs, I'll define SMEs in different clusters. So if you're looking at the manufacturing SMEs, definition of SME in India is different from the definition in Canada from the capital point of view. So your SME will have much larger capital as compared to Indian SMEs in general, again, rule of thumb. And therefore, finding synergies would need them to sit across the table and see if they're non-competitive and therefore they can move forward. For Government of India, it is very important to keep the SME environment stable because one, it creates jobs, and it's extremely important for such a huge population to keep creating jobs. Second, it supports families. Third, it supports societies. And fourth, it supports the entire Indian economy. Today, if we are the 5th largest economy in the world, and as per the recent World Bank announcement, 2025 will be the 4th largest economy in the world, thanks to SME sectors. They have done it. And when we are looking at a more resilient supply chain will need to be in trusted geographies. Again, SMEs play the largest role in securing those supply chains. So SME for us is very important. Your second part, facilitation, yes, we do. We do facilitation at our High Commission in Ottawa. We do facilitation, and in fact, head of our Commerce and Economic Wing is here, Mr. Tripathi is here. So those of you who are interested can share your cards with him, business cards. We have similar offices in Vancouver and Toronto. So we do support them, we do encourage them, and we do try to do the hand-holdings whenever it is required.
Thank you very much for sharing that. In fact, actually, I have so many things I wanted to talk to you about, but 30 minutes, in fact, Julie has waved the card at me that we are running out of time. So now I'll be amiss. In fact, I wanted to talk also a little bit about green energy, which both India and Canada, it's very important on both sides. But I'll also throw the next question at you, and maybe if you have time, you can touch on both. In fact, one of the things which, I'm from academia, so one thing which the current situation, what it has done, it has definitely impacted the student population, mostly international students, Indian students coming to Canada. I would really, before we conclude this, I would really like to hear your thoughts a little bit on how do you see this evolving? Was there, what can we do to facilitate, to sort of Actually, Canada is a beautiful place to add a country to, and Indian students, in fact, it'd be a very welcoming society. So to convince more Indian students that it is what they hear in the news is not necessarily always as scary as it looks.
Thank you very much. So since we have 4 minutes, so let me try to summarize things. Technology is very important, and I believe there are many of us sitting here who are interested in technology. Artificial intelligence is the most important technology trend at the moment. And by 2028, we expect the Indian artificial intelligence market to be $1 trillion US. Next, green energy. Today, we have the total installed capacity of renewable energy, non-fossil fuel, fossil fuel that is, the renewable energy, which is about 44% of total electricity generation capacity in India, which means that using solar energy, we are producing 74 gigawatts of electricity. Today, all renewable energy sources put together, we are producing 122 gigawatts of power or electricity generated from that. Green energy, I'm just jumping from one to the other. Green energy, so hydrogen is the most important source going forward. We have a target, ambitious target nevertheless, we have a target of producing 5 million metric ton of green hydrogen by the year 2030 every year, which would mean that we will need, and this will all be done through solar energy, so which will mean that we need solar electricity of a value of 126 gigawatts, which we will be achieving in 2027. So green hydrogen for 5 million metric ton is not just a dream for us. It could be realized very easily by the year 2030, which will also make us one of the largest green hydrogen producing countries in the world. Wind energy. Wind energy is slower than the solar energy at the moment, moving ahead nevertheless. And by the year 2030, combining all sources, we should be able to generate 500 gigawatts of electricity using renewable sources of energy. Okay, now let me come to the student. Or quantum probably, if someone will be interested in quantum. So in the quantum, we have already put in about $1.2 billion US for research and development, and we hope to see India emerging as one of the most significant players in the quantum, not only in the algorithm side, where we are already a significant player, but also on the hardware side by the year 2030. Education. We have seen the changes which have come, and largely what was happening is that today we have about 427,000 Indian international students in Canada, contributing close to $18 billion to the Canadian economy. Now, when these students come from India, many of them come from poor family. Their parents would sell their lands and farm and animals for them to come here. And when they are duped by unethical outlets, I am not calling them universities or colleges, educational outlets, that creates quite a sensation in India. There was a time when we were sending one body bag of an Indian international student every 10 days. And as an ambassador, you can imagine what I would feel in my heart. So, Brand Canada got a bad name in education. So what you said, what should be done? Brand Canada needs to reinstate its position that it used to have, for which stories need to be told. I had been telling Indian international students who have stayed here for a year or 2 years to go on the social media, talk about the struggles that they had, but also talk about how did they overcome those struggles. If I'm coming from different culture, I will have struggles. And that is not a news. News is that how did you overcome those struggles? So those videos are doing rounds on various social media, largely on, I shouldn't name a company, so on the social media. And many of the Indian parents have learned from that. Lastly, if such information is shared in the Indian local languages, I was just talking to the gentleman next to me, there are 22 official languages. So if they are shared in India, in Punjabi, in Tamil, in Malayalam, in Gujarati, in Hindi, then what happens is that parents who are sending their students, who have got the key say whether the student comes to Canada or not, are also able to understand what lies ahead.
Thank you very much, Excellency Verma. I hope the crowd actually caught the number that he mentioned. India exists with 22 different languages with different scripts, not just 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire et Monsieur Ravi. J'invite maintenant Monsieur Francis Paradis à venir remercier notre invité.
Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire de l'Inde au Canada, Son Excellence Sanjay Kumar Verma, Monsieur le Sous-ministre des Relations internationales de la francophonie, Monsieur Alain Sancartier, Mesdames et Messieurs des membres du Conseil d'administration du CORIM, chers collègues aussi du monde des affaires, qui font affaire en Inde, bien sûr, distingués invités, chers amis, bonjour, hello, namaste. Je suis heureux d'être parmi vous dans le cadre de cette conférence Relations Inde-Canada, état des lieux d'aujourd'hui et de l'avenir organisée par le CORIM. On my behalf and on behalf of all of those present, I would like to extend a special thanks to the High Commissioner of India for taking the time to speak to us about Canada-India relations in the current context. Judging by the large number of people gathered today, these relations are particularly relevant and important for many Québécois. Au cours de sa présentation, M. le Haut-Commissaire Verma nous a livré un message franc qui vise la poursuite des relations constructives entre l'Inde et le Canada, malgré les difficultés actuelles. Quebec is committed to maintaining dialogue with its long-term partners, such as India. We are looking forward to developing mutual beneficial governmental, economical, and institutional ties with India, which is an important component of Quebec's Indo-Pacific territorial strategy. I would like to that effect to take the time to underscore the presence of many Quebec's businesses with ties to India and with us today. The Quebec government and its Quebec office in Mumbai have forged close ties with partners in India over the past 15 years. D'ailleurs, les employés qui œuvrent au bureau du Québec à Mumbai assurent des dossiers courants et continuent d'être au service des entreprises et organisations du Québec souhaitant développer leurs activités en Inde, bien sûr. N'hésitez surtout pas à faire appel à nous pour vous appuyer dans vos projets de développement. En terminant, je remercie de nouveau Son Excellence, M. Sanjay Kumar Verma, pour son discours et l'importance qu'il attache au maintien et au renforcement des liens entre l'Inde et le Québec et le Canada. Ap Yahan Aye Islaya Abko Janavad. Ur Adje Yakehum Yaro Itlaka Kam Kadange. Dhanyavad. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Paradis. Monsieur Ravi, merci beaucoup. Thank you again, Mr. High Commissioner. Et merci à vous tous et à la prochaine.